Before we get into the Christian answer to atheism, we want to explore atheism itself. We want to see what atheism is, what radical secularism is, what the claims are on behalf of these sort of philosophies. Now, I want to introduce the concept of deep atheism as contrasted with, let's call it, normal atheism. So the normal atheist claim is that, hey, listen, I don't really see any evidence for God, and therefore I'm not going to believe in God. Now, right away, that's a little bit strange because there are all kinds of things that we don't have evidence for that we nevertheless do believe in. Things that we can't prove, but nevertheless we operate ordinary life on the assumption that they are true. We take it, you may say, on authority, or they're the necessary prerequisite for what we believe. I recently saw on social media a clip from the atheist Sam Harris saying something like, well, we've got information from the most distant stars, and we just don't see any evidence for God. Now, that is, to me, not a very good argument. Christians have maintained, not just now in response to science, but maintained for many, many centuries that God is not, in that sense, in the universe. The ancient Greeks believed that their gods lived on Mount Olympus, that was someplace on earth. But the Christian view is that eternity is outside of time and space. So God, you can't expect to find God like beyond Pluto or beyond Neptune. And it's not a very sophisticated argument to repeat what a Soviet cosmonaut said many decades ago. I've been in outer space, I've been looking around, and I haven't seen really God. So therefore, we can safely conclude that God doesn't exist. Nevertheless, this claim that there's not enough evidence for God, and therefore we don't believe, that's normal atheism. Deep atheism is somewhat different, and to me, it's epitomized in a character that Milton created. This is Milton's Satan in Paradise Lost. Now, if you follow Satan in Paradise Lost, you can sort of be introduced to him in the very first books, and maybe sometime on the podcast I'll do an in-depth study of Paradise Lost and of Milton. But nevertheless, you right away realize that Milton's Satan is not a denier of God. How can he be? In fact, he's engaged in a kind of dispute and a war, a rebellion against God. So the issue for Satan is not God's existence or non-existence. It's something different. Satan doesn't want to be under God's authority. And so we get this remarkable critique that God is a tyrant. In a sense, the atheist position here is, listen, I don't care if God exists or not. Even if God exists, I don't really want God. Why? Because God is telling me what to do. God has a plan for my life, but I have my own plan. I want to follow my plan and not God's plan. In other words, I want to be the architect, the author of my own, not just choices, but my moral choices. So I want freedom, but not just normal freedom. I don't want economic freedom or political freedom or freedom of speech per se. What I want is moral freedom. I want to be liberated from the Ten Commandments. I don't want to be in what Nietzsche once called the shadows of God. What are the shadows of God? For Nietzsche, this is the moral landscape that is sort of thrown out by religion. Because we believe in God, we don't do this and we don't do that, and we pattern our lives in this way, and we're honest and truthful and kind and compassionate. And for Nietzsche, you don't have to be those things, because if you don't have God, you don't have the shadows of God. And so morality becomes something that is not given, but invented. And there's a very interesting moment in Paradise Lost where Satan at one point refers to himself as self-created. Kind of a shocking statement because, of course, Satan didn't create himself. And Satan knows he didn't create himself. So what does Satan mean by saying that he's self-created? What he really means is that I get to chart my own course in hell. I'm the master of hell, so in hell, I am sovereign. I am God. And so the argument here, and I think this is really the secret desire of the radical secularists, it's not just, separate church and state, let's not have religion in the public square. Ultimately, it is that we get to make our own commandments. We get to erase traditional distinctions, like the distinction between male and female. We get to abolish the nuclear family. It's not necessarily, there's nothing sort of natural or divinely given about the family. It's simply a human artifact. If you want to build it somewhat differently or completely differently, you can totally do that. Here is Satan after he's been flung, as Milton says, headlong flaming from the ethereal sky. Satan is down now, kind of gathering his forces. And he goes, "What though the field be lost? All is not lost. The unconquerable will and study of revenge, immortal hate, and courage never to submit or yield." So the satanic slogan in Paradise Lost, better to reign in hell than to serve in heaven. This is sort of the radical secularist manifesto. This is the deep atheism that Milton is talking about. And this is the atheism ultimately that we need to answer, not just to make the case for the plausibility of God or even to prove God's existence, but to make the plausibility for the alternative way of thinking about the world, a world under God's sovereignty and not freed from it.